Go again.
3, 2, 1, time. Welcome back to the Movement for Life podcast. My name is Kolby Krystofik. I am one of your hosts here. We are missing the lovely and beautiful Coach JR this morning, so you just get an episode with me, which is going to be awesome. I've got some really fun stuff to talk about. But before we get into it, I'm going to talk about what I did this last week. I just got back from vacation in Hawaii. I did not do a lot of CrossFit while I was in Hawaii. I did do some working out. Probably one of the more fun things that I did was actually a beach run in Honolulu on Kauai. I went from the pier in Honolulu all the way around the beach, did a sand run towards the end of the bay, and then all the way back. It was just over 3 miles as far as a run go, which is not a terribly long distance, but running on North Shore sand was kind of rough. I will say that. My calves were very sore after doing that run. It wasn't very fast, but it was difficult. The other thing that I did, but it wasn't just in the last week because I've just gotten back, was the first week that I went out to Hawaii. In Oahu, I did a CrossFit competition with a coach from a gym in Kauai and our friend Kyle Womack as well. We did an interview here on the show. That was a ton of fun. It was 4 workouts, I believe, and then the top 5 athletes did a final workout as well. That was at Jump Ship Kailua. It's a ton of fun, great competition. Seth over there was a ton of fun to do a little workout, a couple of workouts over there and with them. So that was the majority of my exercise. I got in the water. I surfed a few times. I swam a couple of times, but the swimming was relaxed swimming. It was mellow. There was a lot of beach hangout, a lot of eating delicious foods, and a lot of sunsets and sunrises. It was beautiful. It was great. I'm happy to be back. This week, I've got something fun and kind of special, something that I've been asked about on several different occasions. I've talked about it in a couple of different occasions. Today, we're going to talk about heart rate zones and how you should be potentially training heart rate zones when it comes to CrossFit or training in general. Like, what are the zones that you want to be sitting in? What do the zones mean? Then I also want to talk about that relationship between heart rate and what some scientists call the lactate threshold, because those two things are different. Zone heart rates or heart rate zones and your lactate threshold are different. There is not a direct relationship between your heart rate and your lactate threshold. So we're going to get into that sort of thing today, which is going to be a ton of fun. This is going to be an awesome episode that you're going to want to listen to. If you're on YouTube, I'm also going to be able to pull up a couple of articles that we're going to walk through. I'm going to actually show you an example or an analogy of something that we're going to talk about with lactate threshold too. So if you're not watching this on YouTube, maybe it's a fun one to hop over to YouTube and watch as well. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is heart rate zones. We've probably all heard of heart rate zones before. Basically, they are percentages of your max heart rate, right? With zone 1 being the lowest percentage and zone 5 being the highest percentage. So before I kind of talk about training and heart rate stuff, I want to talk about, hey, how are we defining each of these zones and what does that mean? So max heart rate, there's a couple of different calculations for figuring out your max heart rate. Max heart rate calculator. And one of them is your 220 minus your age. That is the simplest way to do that. Let's say if I'm 30, 220 minus 30, I'm 31. 220 minus 31 would be 189. Would be my simple way to calculate my max heart rate. There's actually a little bit more that's not as accurate. That's a rough estimate. There's another more accurate way that would be 206.9 minus 0.67 of your age. So I'm going to do a quick little math calculation and see, hey, how close is that to my actual max heart rate? Max heart rate. 0.67 times 31. Okay. And that puts me at 189 or 186.13 would be my projected max heart rate. The cool thing about a max heart rate calculator is that's just a rough estimate. If you have some sort of smart device, you may be able to more accurately come up with a max heart rate for your training. I know for me, my max heart rate, I believe, is like around 199 to 200 is where I've been able to get a max heart rate. So from that max heart rate, we got to look backwards. And there's zone 1, which is considered very light, zone 2, which is light, zone 3, which is vigorous, zone 4, which is high, and zone 5, which is maximal capacity. So zone 1, as a percentage of your max heart rate, it is 57% or less of your max heart rate. So this is really like most of the things that you're doing throughout your day, like your work, eating your food, potentially going for a walk, you could be under that 57% as well. Then you have zone 2, which is 57 to 63% of your max heart rate. Then you have zone 3, which is 64 to 76% of your max heart rate. Zone 4, which would be high intensity, is 77 to 95% of your max heart rate. And then you have zone 5, which is basically maximal heart rate at 96 to 100% of your max heart rate. Now, as for a baseline of like what kind of exercises are happening or what is happening at each of these levels, we talk about zone 1 being at like rest and warm up activities and cool down activities. Zone 2 is a good base level for aerobic cyclical activities. Thinking about your running, think about your rowing. This is long, like you could do this for a very long time, base aerobic capacity. Then you have zone 3. This is where you're probably going to stick around for endurance activities. So that zone 2 is you're thinking that 15 to 30 minute range. Extended level endurance activities, you're thinking that 30 minutes beyond, 30 minutes to an hour, hour to 2 hours. So you're thinking about like a half marathon training or marathon training, longer activities. Zone 4 is the target for anaerobic activities. Anaerobic means you're not using oxygen for the supply of energy. Anaerobic means whatever energy is stored in the muscle, that is what is being used for that activity. So when your heart rate is at that, what did I say, 75 to 95%, it is very, very difficult for you to do enough exchange of oxygen and blood exchange to get new oxygen or O2 molecules to the muscles fast enough when they need them. So this is mostly going to be anaerobic. And then zone 5 is likely going to be speed type training. So which is also going to be in that aerobic range, not the anaerobic range, not the aerobic range as well. Now, when we talk about CrossFit training, like where should my heart rate be when I'm doing training inside CrossFit? great questions. In the CrossFit workout portion of the workout, because we have an entire hour, and if you turn on a smartwatch, it'll start tracking your heart rate. Within the first 10 minutes, you should probably get yourself in and out of zone 1 and zone 2 in that warm-up portion. Maybe one time during that warm-up, you're going to get yourself up into zone 3 for activities, but not for any extended amount of time. The goal would be to increase that heart rate and then lower it right back down to that zone 1 or zone 2 for like 1 or 2 minutes, maybe even 30 seconds at that higher range. But when we're talking about the workout portion, when we are looking at a workout that is longer than 3 minutes long, which for us is almost every single one of our workouts. Most of our workouts we're going to see between 6 and 15 minutes. Maybe we could do an average of all of our workouts between that 7.5 or 8 minutes and 18 minutes. You're going to see probably 80% of our workouts inside that range. As for the metabolic conditioning portion of things, you should be, for the majority of that workout, in zone 2 to zone 3. The last 2 minutes, max 3 minutes of that workout, can you push to a zone 4 or zone 5? And we'll kind of talk about why that's, and those are ranges. We'll talk about why in just a second, but you should be in that zone 2 to zone 3. If the workout is closer to that 8-minute range or 7-minute range, 7 to 10 minutes, then you're looking at that zone 3 to be for most of the workout, right? So you're going right into that zone 3 and then finishing in that zone 4 or 5. If we're looking at that 18-minute workout, you're starting out the workout in that zone 2, right? Zone 2 is 57 to 63% of max heart rate. It should feel like, hey, this is fairly easy. Then maybe around halfway, we move ourselves into that zone 3 heart rate, even though that's for endurance activities. When we're looking at the high intensity training like CrossFit, you'll be moving into that zone 3 training, which is 64 to 76% of max heart rate. And then only until the last 2 to 3 minutes should we be hitting that zone 4 or zone 5 on the heart rates. Now, here's the thing. That was my guidelines. You should be on zone 2 on the longer workout, zone 3 on the shorter workouts, and the last 2 minutes or so, we're moving into that zone 4 and 5. This is what happens for most of us when we do CrossFit workouts. We think this should be hard, this should be intense. So what I do is I immediately go out hot in round 1 or minute 1, or as soon as I start, and I take myself from when I start, I was in zone 1, I was below 70% recovery. Within 60 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds, the work that I'm doing, I move myself immediately into zone 4 or zone 5. And when I move myself immediately into zone 4 or zone 5, I am no longer able to use oxygen to supply my muscles with energy. What this feels like. This feels like when you go into a workout and in round 3, you're trying to breathe, and you can no longer continue to do the work. You're spending maybe just as much time taking rest as you are being able to work. Now, this is a sort of a unique thing inside CrossFit because it's not like an Orange Theory where you're on a rower and the only thing that you're doing is rowing. And when you're only doing rowing, it's a little bit easier to understand, hey, where's my heart rate at and how can I keep it there? But when we're doing CrossFit, we may be doing some jump rope and we may be doing some weightlifting and we may be doing some gymnastics all in the same workout. But I still have to, as an athlete or as somebody that's training, I still have to be able to monitor or understand. Maybe I have a smartwatch to help me with that. Where is my heart rate? Where do I need to slow down or take a break? Because I feel if I do 10 of these instead of 5 of these, my heart rate will shoot past zone 3 into zone 5. I can't have that too early on. I want to figure out, hey, how can I stay in those zone 2 and zone 3 early on in my workouts, in those first 4 to 10 minutes of workout? I want to stay in that range. This takes practice, and it feels weird to hold back. But the thing that you can do to help practice this is put yourself in the mindset of a runner. And if a runner has to run 5 miles, but I say it's timed, and I say, okay, here we go, 3, 2, 1, go. You wouldn't go out and run a 6-minute or a 7-minute mile on that first mile thinking, well, I know I'll slow down, but I'll just be able to keep up a pretty good pace. No, the runner is going to say, okay, I know that I'm pretty sure I can hold let's say, for example, a 12-minute mile, no problem for 15 miles. So I'm only going to run 5 miles. I think I'm going to run a faster pace than that. So let's say I want to hold a 10-minute pace the whole time. So I go out on mile run and I run my 10-minute pace on mile 1. I finish mile 1 and I go, that feels good. It feels easy. Going to a second mile. Okay, that's getting a little bit harder, but I still nailed that 10-minute pace. That third mile, okay, my heart rate is now in that zone 3 area, and I'm still keeping that 10-minute pace. I go into mile 4, and I hit that 10-minute pace, and maybe I've just now switched into that zone 4 heart rate. Like, wow, this is actually getting way harder. My heart rate is now in zone 4. Okay, I've got one more mile. Maybe I finish that last mile in 10 minutes, but my heart rate's at zone 4 or zone 5. What we often do as CrossFitters is start that first mile at zone 1, right? We start the first mile, we go that 6-minute or 7-minute mile, and we put our heart rate all the way up to zone 4 or 5. We're like, all right, great. I was well under my 10-minute mark. Okay, this next one, I will fall off a little bit. So my heart rate probably stays up high, but this time I came in at 9 minutes on my second mile. My heart rate's still in zone 4, zone 5 though. Then that third one, I come in and I'm now at 11 minutes on my mile. My heart rate's still in that zone 4, zone 5. I can't slow it down. Now I go into that fourth mile, and this mile I'm at 13 and a half minutes or 14 minutes, and my heart rate is finally starting to go down to that zone 4, maybe touching that zone 3 area. And then finally I hit that final mile, and I'm almost walking and running some of it because I couldn't even keep up. I'm at that 14-minute mark or 15-minute mark, and now I finish that final one. Maybe the last 30 seconds, I bring my heart rate back up to zone 5, but I'm finishing the workout in zone 3 or zone 4 for the workout. So we often front loading that heart rate instead of back loading that heart rate. I want you to think about starting in that zone 2 or zone 3 and then moving into that zone 4 or zone 5 and the last little bit of the workout. Let's see. I'm going to include this article for you guys as well. The next thing I'm going to talk about is anaerobic threshold. We'll make this quick. Anaerobic threshold is probably the more important factor here. For a lot of us, that heart rate is going to help us understand the anaerobic threshold or the lactate threshold. This is the point in which the body can no longer keep up with producing energy from oxygen, and the energy consumption turns to anaerobic or no oxygen. The heart rate, this is basically there becomes a non-linear correlation between the heart rate and the oxygen usage for energy. As soon as that nonlinear correlation starts to happen, that is when we've met our lactate threshold. Now, in CrossFit training, the lactate threshold is often compared to what we call redlining. And I'm going to give a little example of what redlining is as far as like a car goes. But this is kind of what's happening. In a red line, I am starting to produce most of my energy from an anaerobic or without oxygen. And so I start to build up metabolites, and there's a finite amount of energy that's available for that. So that starts to build and build and build. There's a byproduct of lactic acid, which is what we all know, that burning sensation inside the body. That has to be removed from the body. It can't just continue to build up, continue to build up, continue to build up. At some point, we have to slow down or stop so the body has time to flush that and replenish some of it. We can't just continue to build it up. The only way to do that is stopping activity. And this is what I'll talk about with that red line. If you've ever been in a car, there's a speedometer and there's an RPM range, and there's a red limit on that. You can safely go up to that red limit, but once you go up to that red limit, we've all heard that. That red limit is basically at the point of the engine that it's saying, hey, I can no longer continue to perform at this level. So I need to reset. So I need to bring my RPMs back down so that I can start to produce power again. That is more or less what's happening inside the body when we hit a lactate threshold. Now, it's a little bit different for everybody, but in general, that's what it's looking like. So when I hit my lactate threshold, I might be able to perform for a very short amount of time, but then the body needs to reset before it can go again. I'm going to show a little example of that as well. So let's share my screen. How do I do that? I guess we'll just be listening to it here. So here it is. Very cool. So there is our red line example. You hear it kind of throttle out, then you hear it throttle down, then you hear it rev back up. That is what we are trying to avoid when we're doing our CrossFit training. What happens often is we don't understand where our lactate threshold is. We go beyond that lactate threshold, and in the middle of the workout, when we're supposed to be going hard, we have to, quote unquote, rev down in order to continue on. So I have to rev down, slow down, rest, let my heart rate come down, and then I can start going again. That's not something that we want to be doing inside CrossFit workouts. You're going to feel terrible. And if you've ever done a CrossFit workout like this, you feel terrible when you do this. You feel like, man, I hit a wall in the workout. I finished the workout and I felt miserable. But if I can approach it appropriately, right, that zone 2 to start, zone 2 or 3, and then at the very end, move to that zone 4 or zone 5, I'm going to feel like I crushed the workout. Now, obviously, there's playing back and forth because you're not going to know exactly where that is for you right now. We don't have RPM monitors on ourselves. Maybe the closest thing that we have is these smartwatches with a heart rate monitor on them. So it's going to take some playing. If you feel like, hey, I redlined and I went way too hard, too early, your next workout You need to do the opposite. You need to go not hard enough or not too hard in the beginning, and then feel like you're ramping up your intensity, zone 3, zone 2, zone 3, and then last couple of minutes, let's go hard. If you felt like, oh, I could have gone harder, great. We know next time you can push a little harder. But you need to be on both sides of that. You can't be redlining every single workout and never playing the opposite side. You will actually feel way more productive in your workouts when you don't redline. You will probably finish more rounds. You will probably finish more reps. You will probably be able to lift more weight. When you do those things, you will also get better response from your training, which means you'll get stronger, you get faster, you get better conditioning, more power output out of your workouts. The response to your training is better when power output is increased during your training. So I'm going to include 2 different articles in today's video here. I couldn't figure out the screen share for you, but you got to hear a little bit of redlining as well. I'm going to share these in the show notes for this and on the YouTube video. So I want to know, give me a comment, leave me a comment on here, leave me a comment on the YouTube page, or send me an email, kolby@oxnardmovement.com. I want to know if you've ever struggled with feeling like, hey, you just redline in a workout and you have to sit down and rest, and you can't figure out how to better manage your heart rate or your lactate threshold. And I want to help you figure out, hey, what's a plan we can put together for you to better manage that? I would love to do that for anybody. Send me a DM. I'll give you some recommendations. We can talk about different training types. We can talk about heart rates. We can talk about tracking. Hey, what do you have to track your heart rate? How should you be feeling? So send me an email, kolby@oxnardmovement.com. I'd love to chat with you guys about the relationship between heart rate zones and lactate threshold and how you can better understand those two so that you can get the most out of your training. Have a great Thursday. We will see you all next week. Don't forget to rate us. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out all of our other channels, the YouTube page, the Instagram. We're putting out a ton of content all the time, free stuff. Members, if you are a member at Oxnard Movement, you have access to all of our free content at oxnardmovement.com/members. There is a passcode for that, so you need to talk to one of our coaches or myself to get the passcode for that, because that is completely for you guys. Tons of awesome resources in there. Recipe guides, sleeping tools, activity tools, stress management, goal setting, all sorts of awesome stuff for you. Have a great Thursday. We'll talk to you next week.